Welcome back to Between Two Racks with the Kilo Crew. This week's episode, a topic that comes up a lot for us from a lot of our students, the real general population client. So, let's kick it. When I say that this topic comes up a lot for us, I believe there's some misunderstanding sometimes if you're a new student with us or you've been a student with us for a long time, is we know, Stefan, a lot of your background and what you're very passionate about is the performance side of things, and you've worked with professional athletes, and that's kind of one of the things that I think people categorize you in a lot of the times is the performance training. However, we still view performance for general population clients differently, but at the same time, we still always look for performance in our training. We're not ignoring performance as a whole. So before we dive into this topic, I want us to define what we mean by the true general population client.
Yeah, so that to me it's a big struggle because like I've always struggled with that part because I don't like what is Gen Pop. Whenever you talk to the average trainer, it's almost like Gen Pop is everybody. But at the same time, it's almost like they're always talking about the stay-at-home mom with the bazillion kids or the type A executive that has a very stressful job in their early 40s and on and on. So if that's Gen Pop, well, within Gen Pop, there's different layers of capacity. So to me, like why we're calling it real Gen Pop, it's like, well, we need to define what that is, because a lot of people, to me, whenever they describe a situation where they say it's a Gen Pop, to me, they're talking about somebody who's broken, that can't move, that's injured, that's overweight, et cetera, but at the same time, you could have a stay-at-home mom or the executive business guy that are highly efficient in the gym, that are athletic because they have athletic background, they're lean, they eat well, they want to push, they want to perform. So,
and they still play sports. Like, think of all the people who are in different leagues and they play basketball or they do different type, or they play tennis, racquetball, like all those things. So they're still Gen Pop, but they still have like that penchant towards where performance is really important to them.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I always tell them is, well, if that is Gen Pop, and then the athletes are athletes, so they don't count because they're athletes, then what are you, or what am I?
What are we?
Because I'm definitely not an athlete the same way a pro athlete's an athlete, where their nervous system gets things like in a flash. You can teach them anything really, really quick. They get the information. They change faster than the average person. So that's not me. So then what am I? So if I'm Gen Pop, well, then I'm definitely way different than some of the Gen Pop that coaches describe when they talk about a case study. So it gets complicated.
Yeah. A Gen Pop is someone who doesn't have like a specific date to perform. Like if we were going to put a general term on it.
But sometimes they do, but it's not performance. They have goals that then can
like a wedding.
a body comp goal.
Yeah. But in terms of performance, I guess.
Yeah, there's the reality of it is there's no tidy way to group everyone into one basket, because Gen Pop spans such a wide variety of people, from completely broken to just retired from. Like if someone is just retired from playing sport 3 or 4 years ago, but they're now Gen Pop, they're no longer an athlete. They don't have athletic goals anymore. They're going to be training differently. Their outlook on training is no longer performance driven. So they're going to be looking at it with a more Gen Pop mindset. So it's just such a broad ranging thing. So you near have to look at them and are they coming in with some sort of massive limitation because of an injury or movement patterns, have never moved before, so they're really slow picking up the motor control and stuff like that? Or have they played sports all their youth and have really good movement patterns because of that and can pick up things really well and have the desire to push their training hard for a performance outcome or for a aesthetic outcome or whatever that it may be? So like, you near have to generalize in specific ways to what a Gen Pop person is.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to when we're saying that we get questions a lot and people are referring to general population. And with everything what you guys are saying, the majority of times when someone reaches out to us with that question, it's they train maximum 3 times a week, mostly like 2 times a week. They do have the training limitations like you guys are discussing, and maybe they do have some still performance goals that are activities, but they're still limiting the amount of times, not limiting, but they go to the gym maybe 2 times, maybe 3 times if you're lucky with these clients. That's what I think when people now say Gen Pop, they're referring to, because I do think it's a lot more common now where you do have people that are, because strength training is more popular mainstream now, that people do want to strength train, but maybe they're only doing it twice a week, but they're still being active on other days per week.
Yep.
Like, I think that's kind of how...
Yeah, because, I mean, that's the reality, right? Because how often do I teach a course and then somebody in the crowd was like, yeah, but what about Gen Pop? So I guess the reason why we're calling it training the real Gen Pop is we're going to talk specifically about what Kelsey just described as what is a Gen Pop to the eyes of the average coach. But I just wanted to reiterate the fact that Gen Pop, in my opinion, is way too wide.
Gen Pop is everybody else that trains.
I'm Gen Pop, and I wouldn't want to train the way we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, for us, it's almost like the training client becomes... You're an athlete who truly needs to perform. You're a bodybuilder looking for very physique-driven goals. Mm-hmm. Or you're like us, where you want some of those other things, but you're still training. Your frequency is still there. So I think the first thing we need to kind of assess when we're talking about these clients is that the training frequency is going to be one of the biggest limiting factors in terms of how you're then addressing the training for these individuals.
Yeah, but can we just agree that these people, these Gen Pops, are people who wants to strength train because their doctors told them it was good for their health, and that's pretty much it. They don't necessarily...
I don't necessarily
have a
agree
true
with that.
Performance goal per se.
Maybe not a performance goal, but I still think that
they still want to get stronger in the gym without having a specific, like...
Yeah, but it's easy to be stronger when you have zero base.
No, so exactly. But that's, that's most of the people that...
Well, I think a big thing is, for me, Gen Pop are the people who come in with very general goals.
Yeah.
To a huge extent. So someone who comes in with a very specific goal, I think, have that one step further of a commitment to the training process. People who come in with the general goals, oh, I'd like to be a little stronger. I'd like to be more toned. Okay, I'm now bucketing you in the Gen Pop bucket, and your outlook on training is going to be a little bit different. Whereas someone says, oh, I want to increase my squat by 25%. Okay, I know you know what your squat is. You know where you want it to be. Okay, we can be a little bit more specific with the training approach because you have a very specific goal.
Yeah,
I think
so what would be your answer to the 38-year-old woman who comes to you and says, okay, I have a very specific date, getting married in 16 weeks, and I want to be in the best shape of my life, but I don't care about becoming stronger. I don't want to build muscle. I want long muscle. I want to be lean.
I'd probably tell her that's great. Let's do it.
Gonna make your muscles so long.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, their understanding of the physiology behind it doesn't actually matter.
Okay, so let's break down if you're training someone with only Do you find there's a big difference between the 2 to the 3 sessions per week?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, with 2 sessions a week, you're really just maintaining activity. Like, you can't really.
I mean, if you have zero base, you'll gain in
you'll
the
always,
first few
but
months.
you'll always get stronger. The first time you train someone, they can only, a woman can only dumbbell press like 5 pounds. She'll get stronger. She'll do 10 pounds eventually, 12, 13, whatever. But it's still so little exposure to weight training that it's just going to take a little bit longer. But I feel like with 3 times, most of my clients throughout my career was 3 times a week. I can count on one hand people who train 4 times in the gym, and they still got they got the results they wanted. They got significantly stronger than the people who only do 2 times a week.
Do you want to start with the 2 times or the 3 times? What adjustments are made to the training and what you consider?
We can do twice.
Okay, so let's start with the lowest dose. Because when someone just says they're training once a week, is that just something?
That's out.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want in the gym. It's just if they're only training once a week and only touching weights once a week, it's just exposure to lifting some weight, but it doesn't. Man, that's going to take forever.
Yeah, at that stage, you have to be saying, or that is all they can afford is to train once a week with a trainer. That's fine, but
hopefully they're still
do
doing
something
it.
else.
You have to encourage them to go and do something else throughout the week.
Okay, so twice a week in regards to, let's even start with the optimal layout of those 2 days. Are you talking in an ideal situation for someone that trains twice a week? Are you saying they're training with 1 day off in between, 2 days off in between? What would your ideal even structure of that look like?
Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday type of thing. So 2
days.
2 to 3 days in between session.
Yeah, just to try and evenly spread the training stressors across the week, not have a massive detraining period in between the 2 sessions. So if say it was Tuesday, Thursday, then that's a huge gap from Thursday back to Tuesday. So at least stretching that another day is going to make a decent difference at that frequency of training.
Normally, all of you all say that when you're looking at twice a week, it's full body.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would really struggle to come up with a situation that I would think full body isn't the right answer for 2 times a week training. Someone's super, this is not a Gen Pop client. Someone's super well trained and they are taking a bit of a step back from training for a period of time. They could get away with doing an upper lower because they don't want to impose too much stress. So they're just going to do whatever they need. So go in and do their maintenance volume of upper, maintenance volume lower the next day. They're not going to lose their motor learning that they've built over years and years and years of training.
Yeah, it's basically they're pausing through time.
Yeah.
Hoping there's not going to be much detraining.
But that is not the population we're talking about right now. So any Gen Pop full body training twice a week.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at structuring those full body sessions, what type of training is it? What's the structure of the actual full body session?
So first of all, though, before we even get there, I just want to say that for me, if you're training a Gen Pop, so a regular human being who doesn't have a specific goal to compete in a physique competition or to become an athlete in something, well, you still want them to be as functioning as a human as they can, especially as they grow older, especially if they have younger kids and on and on. So to me, to first make sure that we stress the client through training in movement patterns that are going to be challenging for them, but also in movement patterns that they can do and that is safe for them. So for me, Gen Pop, you could use the lazy approach of being well, I'm just going to put you on machines. It's stable, it's fixed, it's easy. You don't need to worry about much. Just push as hard as you can. Yeah. That's fine for a phase or two if you're really trying to drive or hypertrophy or not have to worry about, let's say you're doing higher rep and like metabolic stress type training modalities and you don't want to overly stress on technique, fine. But if this becomes the sole training style of a Gen Pop for the long run, I think personally it's a mistake because you're not
bettering them.
You're not really improving their skills as a human. You're actually risking long-term overuse injuries and on and on. So that to me is an important...
Yeah, like I just wrote a blog post for the Continuum pretty much on that point. And it's all based around a very fancy term of proximal stability allows for distal function, which pretty much means if you cannot control your core, it doesn't matter how strong your limbs are, you won't be able to express that through life. Yeah. But yeah, like machines are great. They allow you to really tax a muscle to its full extent, really work as close to failure as possible. But if you've never integrated that function with the use of stabilizing your body through space, you're going to be very limited on how well you can actually use that newfound force producing capability in real life. So hugely important to have some level of integration of these movement patterns while controlling your body through space. Where was I going with that point?
But I don't know if it's going to help, but it's like once you have that as a goal with the Gen Pop client, now you need to qualify where he fits in the movement pattern that you want that person to perform. So let's say you want the client to squat. Squatting, we know it's one of the primary motor patterns. But if the person has zero mobility and the heels come off the floor and on, and he leans forward like crazy, then you need to regress to the variation of the squat pattern that's safe and doable for that person. And then from that starting point, you use a linear approach in exercise progression to challenge him or her over time to become more proficient at that pattern, so they can eventually, maybe, not all the time, not everybody will be able to, but that maybe they'll be able to perform a full perfect full squat at the end of the day. So that to me is the goal with Gen Pop. And then the organization of the session, that it's twice a week full body or 3 times a week, it doesn't matter as much at this point, because it really is more to see, okay, what does that person has in terms of movement availability, and then what can we do to improve it. So obviously twice a week is the bare minimum, 3 times a week way better. But to me, it's all about the movement pattern. And then once you kind of did your work with the primary movement patterns, then if you have more training time, more training units, then you can afford to be a little bit more finicky with like smaller body parts or single joint movements and on. All that remedial stuff. It's hard to be really focused on remedial work when you're a novice with a low training age, training twice a week. You need to spend most of your focus on learning multi-joint motor patterns.
Was something like that with the twice a week, where you have you're starting with whatever progression they're currently at for their primary exercises. In the B and C series, once you get them to a point where their movement patterns across their training sessions are decent and they move well and they can repeat it from one week to the next without always having to recoach them, is that where you can kind of throw in things like drop sets and extended sets into the B and C?
Because by the time now they get to know the movement, by the time the skill is learned, now you load.
Oh, okay. So you're saying, So you're saying,
but I'm not going to do drop set chains like eccentric hooks until we've.
I was very specific with drop sets.
I'm just exaggerating with the techniques, but it's the same thing. Like drop set, like why would I use an intensifier at a point in the trainee's career where we haven't intensified through load?
But I think this is definitely something that trainers do, when I see trainers do, where they're trying to bring some level of intensity into the session, and they choose things like that.
You can, but you still need to have a solid base, because you just said now they've learned the movement pattern. Can you now use drop set? No, not if they just learned it. Because if they learned it, it means we haven't really loaded it yet. Once you've loaded it, then as a plateau buster, change of pace, whatever, add the intensifiers. But you can be like, okay, well, I've been doing goblet squat with a heel wedge forever, and now all of a sudden I'm able to do a ass to grass feet flat back squat. So now because I can do this now out of the blue, let's do drop sets.
No, but that's
or,
not. I'm
she's
saying
the B series.
Yeah, like
more.
not on the primary exercises. I'm not talking.
yeah, but
about
full
those.
body, the B series is a primary exercise. The C series is an assistance. The D series is an assistance.
Yeah.
So there's no room for single joint remedial work.
I think what you just said is a good point for even me to hear again, and also the listeners, where you're saying the A series is a primary, the B series is a primary, and then the C series is the assistance, and then if there is a D series, that's where remedial goes.
No.
The D series is also going to be an assistance, and you sort of need to be a D series to have an even flow of upper and lower body exercises within the full body session. Now, what we did in one of our posts in August was we showed like examples of full body sessions that went primary, then remedial for the C and D series, or primary assistance, or somewhat of a mix throughout the week. That's obviously you obviously can't do that, but the base structure of full body training session is going primary assistance, because this is going to have the biggest upside potential for the trainee. The reason you would choose the other variations is if there's very, very specific issues to address within their movement patterns, or something very specific like a nagging injury or something.
Yeah.
So it's very simple. Like you take the first half of a training week. So like we're talking about 4 times a week training with our regular system. So we have upper one, lower one. Now, if I want to make a phase of full body workout, you deconstruct upper one, lower one, and you put it together and you ditch the C series. So if our upper one is a overhead press session and lower one is a squat one session, it means that, and then we'll start with lower body first because it has higher neural demand. So the A becomes the squat from the squat workout. So that's the primary. Now the B1, B2 becomes the A1, A2 from the upper body. So it would be overhead press and supinated chin up, assuming they can do a chin up. So that's primary again. So now we're moving on to the C series. Now C series will become the B of the lower body session, which is with squat one, it's a split squat and a lying leg curl. So the split squat lying leg curl becomes the C series of that full body workout. And then that's the assistance exercise. Then we have the assistance of upper body one, which would be a flat dumbbell press and a seated row. And this becomes the D series of that full body session. But right there, assuming you're doing 3 sets, we're talking about like 50 minutes of work. So it's not like there's no room left for fluff.
Yeah.
So I don't have room to do like back extension and step ups and rotator cuff and trap 3 here. But it's fine because at that point in time, the person's training age is so low, the skill set is so low, the training capacity and work capacity is so low that I don't need to focus on remedial. The remedials won't be a limiting factor now. Right now, the limiting factor is there's ability to learn a motor skill. So let's focus on learning motor skill through multi-joint movements that have a higher impact. And then once you have the skill, then you build general strength. So again, we're talking about general strength, so we don't need the specifics of the remedial exercises. So now we've built a certain amount of general strength. We have technical proficiency. Now we can start moving on and expanding with other training tools, because we have the base of what strength training is. So now, okay, wait. So you've been plateauing now with your squat. Could it be your lower back? Okay, now let's go and isolate your back with remedial exercise. And that's when Porig's example of the August post comes into play. So now maybe with that client, this point in time, assuming they're still doing twice a week full body training, maybe now the C series, instead of being split squats and leg curls, now it becomes abs and lower back, for example, because their biggest limiting factor at this point in time. But there's no such thing as a limiting factor when you have no strength base and no movement proficiency.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's hard too because with Gen Pop, people just always assume they're broken, and then they just tend to then only throw the remedial work at them, but it's not. They're really sometimes either completely not injured or they're not injured. They just haven't moved efficiently, and you need to just take them through those.
Yeah. Yeah, but if they're injured, they're injured. I mean, like
that changes
then
everything.
You'll need to do some form of rehab.
Yeah.
That's a different story. But if it's just like somebody that can move.
Yeah. But the idea of exercise economy, and we've talked about this plenty of times in the podcast, is huge for twice a week training. Because, so say like Steph's example there, and say someone does like historically had what they would categorize as a weak lower back. It's not like training a squatting pattern and training a hinging pattern in their 2 full body sessions doesn't train the musculature of the core and the lower back. It's a very efficient way of training it while training other movement patterns or other muscular functions, because we're getting, so say for the squat, we're getting your knee extension, we're getting ankle dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, we're getting hip extension. So we're getting all these different movement patterns as well as the training of the musculature surrounding the lower back, instead of saying, all right, you've got a bad lower back or you've a perceived weak lower back, we're going to spend our time on an isolated lower back exercise. May they need to regress to that? Possibly. Like, that is always a possibility. But a better starting point to try and kick off is finding the squatting pattern that they're able to do that isn't causing any pain, and then start to build the technical capacity there. And it's just you're going to have a better overall training effect, because you're not just specifically targeting one very, very minute aspect of the chain.
I know you kind of brought it up with regards to how the upper body A series becomes the B series, and then you brought up the chin up. So you can definitely have some people that are Gen Pop and can do a chin up. I would say that most trainers probably listening say that the majority of times no, they can't. So when do you choose just to, or when do you move on from pull downs to, say, the chin up progression for these people that only train twice a week? Like, do you not use it with them? Do you use it with them?
I mean, if they're doing full body twice a week, you could still do the chin up progression with them.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard on a time constraints. And when I would use it and when I wouldn't would very much come down to what their current body composition is and their goals. Like, if someone is at all not lean, that is not going to be a very efficient use of time within a full body training session.
Yeah.
Whereas if someone's somewhat lean, you probably could, but it better be a goal of theirs, because at 2 times a week training, you're definitely investing a lot of that training session in for one particular goal.
Yeah.
There's like 2 points I want to add to this with what Porik is saying, because you also have to keep in mind that we're talking about a Gen Pop now, and we're talking about a Gen Pop with, I mean, the person wants to train twice a week, so they're not overly serious, or should I say committed, and they probably don't have a very high level of strength baseline. So if they're training twice a week and then we do the chin up progression, what's the first step in the chin up progression? Eccentrics. So you're overweight and we're having you do eccentrics twice a week with a low trainability.
Yeah.
No.
Man, that client is going to be smoked.
Yep.
Like they have to be.
They won't be able to they won't be able to recover. So Pork's point of like a decent body comp is super relevant, because the one thing you guys need to realize, that's the difference between theory and practice, is once you start applying the full body sessions with that format, you'll soon realize that it's almost impossible to do more than 4 sets for the A series. Okay. By A series, I mean the B series as well for the upper body, which is the A series upper body.
Movements.
So now, considering that phase 1 of the chin-up, you need to reach a total eccentric chin-ups of 15 total reps per session, it means that you're going to need to be able to do at least 4 eccentric chin-up rep per set to be able to hit that target within one session. So just not many people, there's just not enough time spent on the primary in a full body session to really benefit the majority of people who are going to try to attempt the chin-up progression. So that's why if you're attempting it in a full body scenario, you better make sure that you spend at least, I'd say, a mesocycle just doing pull down for a baseline.
At least.
And then that the body comp is somewhat normal range, okay? Like 23%-ish for women, 15-ish% for guys. Because otherwise, like, it just honestly won't work, and you're going to create such discomfort for the trainee that he's going to abandon before he even reach anything.
And then moving on from 2 times a week to 3 times a week, then what does the session structure look like?
To me, it depends, right? So, Alex, with the clientele you've trained in the past, would you say that you had better success doing 3 full body as opposed to alternating upper, lower?
Yeah, especially with women. Women seem to do better with like the full body. You get them to, well, they like to move, so you don't like to extend. They talk too much between sets. So if you just always kind of go back and forth, they like the overall like feeling of overall fatigue as opposed to like localized fatigue.
Yeah, because I think with these women, it's twofold. So you have like psychologically, they love the feeling of that full body exertion, but also on a neural perspective, and this is a known fact, like females' nervous system is less efficient. So they typically need more time rehearsing before they get to that efficiency. Because like once you're at high level, that's the funny thing about that situation. Once you're at high level, the difference between male and female is not big. But in the early stages, it's a huge difference. So the female will fare better with more frequent exposure. So that's why for 3 times a week for certain clients, either female or really weak males, I'd prefer to still sticking to full body, but 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And now at that point, you can be a little cuter if they're let's say they've been training with you for a year at twice a week, and now you go to 3 times a week, but you go full body. At that point, you could have 2 different full bodies that you alternate instead of sticking to the same 3 times a week. At that point, it's fine.
But the way I always did it was I near let their recoverability dictate when they moved away from full body. So you keep them with a full body format until you start seeing, all right, they're not progressing from session to session anymore because the load, the overall stressors is just now too great. That's a really good indication. It's a good time to move on to an upper lower split. You could go a step further and just increase the amount of different full body sessions, but it's always a very short runway to do that because at the end of the day, you're still training the very big muscular structures at the same frequency. So it's generally more beneficial to move to upper lower split and then configure that whatever way you think is going to be most beneficial.
Yeah.
With the 2, but even like the 3 times a week training, if you have a Gen Pop client that's only training with you 2 or 3 times a week, but they are outside, I know that's not what we've been talking about, but they are very, very active. So they do different activities. They run, they like are active outside of that training. Do you then handle the training differently for clients like that?
It depends on the activities. Because there are activities that compete with strength training, and then there are activities that they're complementary. It doesn't compete at all. So it really depends. If we're training, if we're doing heavy weights in the weight room, and then the person is like sprinting a few times a week, and then I don't know, like short track cycling
Oh my gosh.
a few times a week, then I'd be like, okay, well, maybe we need to reduce frequency and volume of strength work. But if it's cross-country skiing or long walks or snowshoeing, I don't know why I have all my snow themes.
Winter, yeah.
Then it's like, well, it doesn't really compete. Then now it depends on the volume. Like if the person does like 12 hours of cross-country skiing a week, okay, well.
But then I guess, again, it always comes back to who is the client in front of you.
Yeah,
like
but
are they coming up and they have muscle and they're somewhat...
Most Gen Pops, it's like when they do an activity, it's like an hour, 2-3 times a week extra. It's never it's rarely the super like overly complex thing. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but keep in mind though, like what's the amount, the frequency, and the type. Yeah. And then what's their recovery? What are they doing?
Recovery is going to dictate it all, because if they are, if you're doing what you're doing and they're still recovering and getting better, and it's not affecting their performance in whatever that other activity is, okay, it's working. If there's a notable change in either their gym performance or their performance in whatever the other activity is, it somewhat depends, because if they are like, oh, I'm okay sacrificing a bit of performance in that other aspect right now because this is my goal, fine, keep going. If they're like, oh no, I want to maintain my performance in that other activity or improve it, okay, and then now I have to readjust.
I guess it always depends on if they're competitive in that other activity. Because if strength training, we're strength training so that they can be better at that activity, maybe initially when they start training, they'll be sore and whatever, and then they have to adapt. But at one point, it shouldn't really affect like their outside activity. And even if like they do a little bit less distance cross-country skiing, it doesn't really matter because they're just out there because they just want to be there.
Yeah.
But then we have to be careful, because remember that client in St. Louis you trained that did the Chicago Marathon?
The triathlon, yeah.
Triathlon, sorry. So is she Gen Pop? Or was she an athlete?
Because
she was a Gen Pop athlete.
She was a Gen Pop athlete.
No, but her training, she was serious.
She was serious
like
about her
training. It was a lot of training.
But with when she was outside the competitive season, then we just we pushed, and she trained 4 times a week. Yeah, she trained 4 times a week, so we pushed. Yeah, but then when we got closer to competition, then I started to modify because she was sore. She was always sore from all the running and the cycling and all that stuff.
Yeah, because the frequency of everything else increased dramatically.
That's why I'm saying that the term Gen Pop just confuses me.
No, but that's why we're laying out what we mean.
But one thing I really want to, I don't know if it's part of your questions, but I just want to make sure we cover is the thing about Gen Pop is, I think Porrick earlier was saying that it's general, right? Mm-hmm. So the thing that, in my opinion, the coach needs to realize is all you need is sound programming. You don't need to overthink the programming, because everything you're doing with them is general. It's not complicated. Like when you write really complex program for athletes and stuff, like that's complicated. But writing a program for Gen Pop, it's easy. What is hard is the coaching in the gym. So I just wish that at that point, when you're dealing with a client, the average coach would spend more time in becoming a better coach teaching the skill or the lift than trying to overanalyze writing the program for a client like this, but then having shitty coaching that slows down the actual rate of progress of the client, because you don't cue them to brace properly when they squat, or to drive with their hips, or this and that. Like if you're not doing your job coaching, which is the most important part for that client at this point in time, well, then the programming matters even less, because you're never going to reach any type of high level. Because in terms of programming, it's absolutely painstakingly simple. you take the online program design course structures where we have the 2 base microcycles, you deconstruct these into 4, which is upper 1, lower 1, upper 2, lower 2 of micro 1, upper 1, lower 1, and upper 2, lower 2 of micro 2. That's 4 different sessions. You jam them into a full body, and then you start with the overhead. You go to so overhead squat 1, incline front squat, bench press squat 2, dip or decline deadlift. Then you rotate. Then you rotate. Then you rotate. Why? Because by using this approach over time, you always have this perfect balance of angles, motor patterns. You're doing the 90-degree principle within the session, but then the phase after, you're doing the other 2 angles. So over time, you're always training both angles. Like all 4 angles are always trained, but at different times, and you're rotating through them. So it's painstakingly simple. There's not much to it until they get really good at the movement, and now they can start putting on weight on the bar. And then at that point, then you're like, okay, well, client X, we need to reevaluate. Do you want to really push the envelope of strength? Or are you happy with where you're at right now and we're just coasting and we're throwing in different targets, different goals to keep things interested?
Yeah. And like the biggest change in exercise selection is going to be like moving along with their ability to increase their movement competency. So it could be that they're starting with a goblet squat with their heels elevated, and they're going to squat for the next year. But the biggest change is, all right, we're going to increase the loadability and the complexity of that squatting pattern to further and further challenge their ability to do a squatting pattern. And then finally, they may get to doing a squat with a high bar, feet flat on floor. That would be the ideal end place, but they might never get there.
Yeah.
Same thing as split squat. You might start front foot elevated with low pulley, and then you end with like a front barbell, rear foot elevated split squat. It's all about progression
And patience.
Yeah.
Patience.
Yeah.
Patience.
and then being a good educator for your client.
Yeah.
To make sure that as the coach, you educate your client so that the client understands the nature of strength training and why he needs to go through that process.
Yeah. You don't tell them that this is a very general thing, because that's not what it is for
I
them.
would, but like I like to be straight up with my clients and educate them for real and explain to them the process and why we're doing it. I mean, I guess it depends who you're training, but I've been fortunate to train people who they always wanted to know the why.
But it
of
also
everything.
matches your personality as a coach. There are some coaches that are like that, but I don't find that the way you speak to a client or the way that's worked for you, that matched you as a coach. Mm-hmm. Like, it's very personality driven and how you talk to the clients and the clients that you attract.
But the way I've always dealt with my clients is I've always wanted to teach them the reasons and all that, so that even if they stop training with me, that hopefully I've impacted something that they can continue training properly for the rest of their lives. So that's why I always like to teach them the things and just be like, and if it's a Gen Pop who's only training twice a week, they need to know that the progressions are going to be really, really slow, and they really need to start enjoying the exercises that they're doing, like split squats, because they're going to be doing a lot of them for a long time. Do you know what I mean? So, like, I think if you educate them, and you can really get them to buy in, then they're more likely to train for the rest of their lives and hopefully train more than just twice a week.
But if as a coach you fall into the trap of entertaining them and falling to every one of their demands on training style and making it fun, making them sweat, and I don't know, man. Like, I guess every coach is different, but to me, it would create such a I would start to feel like an imposter at my job at one point, because I would feel that I'm not giving them what they need. I'm giving them what they want. Yeah. And then it's affecting how I feel about my job as a professional. So it's very important for me to be straight up, to make sure that they're buying into the process, because my goal is for them. My goal was always for my client to end up loving strength training as much as I do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But in order for that to happen, they need to understand what strength training is.
Yeah.
And the more they understand the why behind how the basics are going to get them to where they need to be, the more they somewhat appreciate that they're doing it and they don't resent it as much. So sometimes them having that slightly deeper understanding of, no, we're still doing this because of X, Y, and Z reasons.
And I as personal trainers, as strength coaches, we are supposed to provide a premium service. We're supposed to be knowledgeable. We're supposed to be able to educate our clients, and they're paying us for a premium service. So it's not just doing what they want, because they can go get that for a much lower cost at any type of just mainstream class that doesn't have any of the program design behind it. Before we wrap up this episode, one other thing I wanted to touch on is the periodization component of the Gen Pop 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah. I mean, 2 times a week, in my opinion, there's no periodization needed, really.
You would change the reps, the intensities a little bit, more of a linear type of approach initially, at least. I mean, that's what I've
yes. But what's tricky, though, is, to me, with that clientele, the periodization, like the linear aspect of the periodization, is built in the exercise selection. Because for somebody like you, it's really, really important, because your incline press is your incline press. And then whenever you do an incline press session, like, it's a stressor.
Yeah.
So we need manipulations of volume and intensity to make sure that you can recover from that stressor. But if your squat is shit, and then step 1 is a goblet squat, and then we do goblet squat for like a month, and now you improve your goblet squat. So not only did your skill improve, but now we've put a little bit more weight in a linear fashion. Like, your reps were the same for the month, but linearly we increased the load. Now your goblet looks really, really good. So now we're like, okay, now let's switch it up and let's do a Zercher, and let's drop the heels from 30 degrees down to 20. Now it's a new skill. It's a new motor pattern. We're starting much lighter weight. So now there's a built-in deload, and now we're increasing the load linearly again, because he's learning a new skill. So technically speaking, you could have prescribed 8 reps for your A series for an entire year. It's still linear in the sense that the motor pattern changed. There's a learning curve, and then we linearly increase the load during that time. So there's no true need for a 12, 10, 8, 6 like rep scheme per se. Because if phase 4, you get to the point where you're doing heel elevated cambered bar squat as your progression, and it's 6 reps, but you've never done that movement, well, like, fuck it, it's kind of hardcore right off the bat to do a 6 with something you've never done. So you know what I mean? So that's why I'm saying that periodization, in the sense of how we usually use it, I don't think it's needed with that crowd.
It's also hard because realistically, for those full body sessions, the primary exercise you're going to be training for 3 to 4 sets. So it's not like we have a massive manipulation in how we're dispatching volumes and stuff. So
because let's say we get to the point where we drop it down to 4 reps. What am I going to do? 3 by 4? It's just like it's not well. That's the thing, man. Like, it's so, the 2 times a week is so far removed from
4 times
for real training that it makes it so a lot of those variables and nuances don't really matter at this point in time. And I'm coming back to you as a coach.
Yeah,
it's so much more important. And that's the reason why online training as a whole, like globally, is such a poor service to promote gains with the average person. Because you have the average person who doesn't know how to do a lift, doesn't really know how to train or load, pay for a great program, but they don't have the support to apply the program properly, so they don't have the result. So that's why I would hope that the coach understands that the main purpose of being a coach is being a coach. And then the program design comes as the side, and then the program design gets more complex as your clientele becomes more complex. But nothing beats the coaching, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes what I've done, tell me what you think. So let's say they're learning a new movement pattern, so I'm not trying to get them to do too many reps. So I start with 6 reps. Yeah. And it's obviously way lower. It's where I'm not using the percentages. We have no idea.
Yes.
So they master 6 reps. So instead of increasing the weight, I'll increase the reps.
Yeah.
So after a few weeks, then they do like 8 reps. Once they've mastered that, then I go to 10 and then 12. And then let's say when I change exercise, well, either I change exercise or then I go back to 6 and then we start with heavier weight and then we build that way.
Yeah, that's a good approach. And then you could even be cuter and like use an approach where your quote unquote accumulation blocks, you build the reps. Yeah. And then as a change of pace, the intensification blocks, you build the load.
The load, yep.
And then are you still, with most times, would you say to still use like 3-week mesocycles, or are you saying then?
I would do 4. Like with 2 times a week, I usually do 4 weeks.
Yeah, you can.
Well, I guess it depends.
I like
yeah.
3. I've been doing 3 for like forever, like almost 3 decades. So I like 3, but it's not because my mesocycle changes that necessarily there's a full change in the program. Mm-hmm. It might be minuscule little variations.
I mean, it's just kind of one thing that I wrote that kind of goes to what everyone was saying, and I know you specifically said it, is with this Gen Pop client that's training 2 to 3 times a week and is just getting started, it becomes training the movement, then training the load once that movement's there, and then training progression. Versus like normally with like people who train 4 times a week and have been training a while, like it's, yes, we still need to do those things, but the load's already somewhat there. You're progressing through it faster, like because you're getting more results because your training frequency is higher.
Yeah, but see, sometimes what's tricky, and it's so different, right? Like I feel like I've had 2 lives as a personal trainer. I've had the first part of my career with my 35,000 hours of on the floor one-on-one coaching, and then I have the last 13 years where I'm doing significantly more online. But the big difference, though, is, for example, I have a client, but I just know them from online and the assessment we did and whatever. And then I prescribe, let's say, a 15-degree Garhammer raise. And now, because it's online, I'm looking at the numbers. Okay, 11 reps, 12 reps, 15 reps. Okay, cool. Next progression, 35-degree incline Garhammer. But one day, I get a video from that Garhammer raise, and it's absolutely atrocious. Like there's jerking around like crazy cheats, right? So then I'm like, whoa, can I see your version of the 15-degree? Then those 11 reps they were doing that made me think that it was fine to progress to the 35 were atrocious too. So then I'm like, holy crap. So maybe a supine hip raise is the best exercise for that person at this point in time. So then I give the supine hip raise, and then it actually looks good. Whereas if I'm training the person live, so this we're talking about like 3 months wasted on figuring out the ab exercise. If I'm training the person live and I put 15-degree incline the first time, I see set number 1 and like, holy shit, no, let's do supine hip raise right now. So then right away we're doing supine hip raise. But my point with that whole story is maybe, although my mesocycles are 3 weeks, I might stick to the supine hip raise for 2 back-to-back mesocycles because of lack of proficiency on that movement, whereas phase 2, the neck support on ball or whatever, I don't know why I'm saying this exercise specifically because it's very remedial, but now he's past that. Let's move on, phase 2. So it's not because you're changing mesocycles that it necessarily means that everything needs to change.
Yeah.
You change what needs to be changed. You keep what doesn't need to be changed.
Yeah.
Because it's not everything that needs to be changed.
Yeah. No, for sure. Any other points to bring up with 2 to 3 times Gen Pop training?
But I think your conclusion is the best. You analyze the basic movement patterns. You qualify them to see what your starting point is. You linearly progress the difficulty level of the movement. Once the movement is mastered, you start loading it. And then once the people have a decent amount of strength, then you could be fancier, you could be cuter. You start reevaluating training frequency, training splits, training methods, periodization models, and on and on. But any Gen Pop can become a non-Gen Pop while still being Gen Pop.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if that training frequency ends up increasing. Even if it goes from the 2 to the 3, that's a big step towards a higher training frequency.
Yeah, I think one thing people always misdo with the full-time or the full body train sessions is try and go too high a volume too quickly. Yeah. Like start with a lower volume, so your B or your C and D series probably only going to be 2 sets. Yeah. That's fine. Make sure they're 2 really good quality sets and know you've got room for progression later on with that client. But if you're just trying to get more work in because more work equals more results, it's somewhat of a slippery slope.
Yeah, and it goes back if you're going high volume, if you're going like everything's high, then what? Like you still need to have that space to be able to progress the client and actually find where their strength is.
And those clients need more coaching. So you better be conservative on your volume because you're going to spend more time coaching in between sets and really teaching them how to move like correctly.
I know in the Continuum, we will continue to bring up the Continuum because now it's officially live. You had a question where someone asked about the 2 to 3 times and you provided the different, wasn't it?
No, they were asking about 4 times a week training, but only wanted to do 1 lower body session.
Oh, right. Okay.
So
that's
slightly different. Yeah.
That is different. So we're not going to go into that. But speaking of the Continuum, we did launch the Continuum, which is monthly education at a very low cost for anyone who wants continuing education on a consistent basis. So right now, for only $39 a month, you can join the Continuum and you get a monthly webinar and then a corresponding live Q&A with the presenter of that webinar. The presenters are everyone sitting in front of me, the Kilo crew, as well as guest presenters we're bringing into the Continuum. So you get the webinar, the Q&A, and then with that, every live Q&A gets uploaded to the Continuum with the webinar, and it basically exists as any of our online courses do. So you can pre-submit your questions for the Q&A so they're always answered. And then we also have a corresponding Continuum forum. Currently, as of right now, we're at about 160 members, which is pretty dope. Everyone's hopping in, introducing themselves. We do have coaches. I know I always say it, but it truly is all around the world with very different backgrounds in what they're doing, from performance to Gen Pop, females, males. And even within the first week now of getting it out there, we've had questions that pop in. So it's just a cool place. And within the forum, it's all categorized by different goals. So we have a nutrition board we added. We had foundation, advanced strength, body composition, sports performance. So it'll be fun to see as that
fitness.
business as that pops up, just the more discussions that we get going. So we did basically create this continuum as a continuation of everything we do here at Kilo, and we wanted just to create something that is more ongoing, that keeps us communicating with you. You listen to this podcast every Monday morning, evening, afternoon, whenever you do, but now this is a way to continue to interact and get more in-depth knowledge with the webinars. So we are excited for the Continuum.
If you're not listening to this podcast within the week it comes out, that launch price will be gone. So it may not be $39.99 anymore.
That's true.
But it is one of those things that it's, you know, we launched it. We got our founders in, like the first people that get in. And those are the people that know that when we release something, we're very serious about it. And we won't let it fall short of delivering something that's of value to our students and listeners. So I'm really excited for that one. And I think we do have this incredible community with all of our coaches that we've met and haven't met. Like, it was, you can see within the forum what online courses a lot of people have done. And now you see these people sometimes and you're like, man, you've done every 11 course, but we haven't met you, which is weird sometimes. You might feel like you know us and we want to know you, but we don't really know you. So hopefully one day we meet you in person, or even we get to know you more virtually with everything we'll begin to do online as well. traingilo.com for more information. See you next week.